Okay, good morning everyone. It is 11 o'clock. Welcome to Cabinet. As usual, it's broadcast live via the website and archived so you can look at it. Microphone's on when you speak and off when you've finished. Apologies. None. We have none. Minutes pages 5 to 18. I'll move the minutes of the meeting held on the 23rd of June are taken as read, confirmed and signed. Deborah?
I'll second that.
All in favour? Thank you. Urgent items, none. Declarations of interest. Both myself and Deborah are on the Bradgate Park Trust at agenda item 9. So we'll both leave the meeting and Lee Brecken will chair the meeting for that particular item. I've got a non-registrable interest from Mr. Shepherd. Item 9, again as a member of the local pension board. Any others from the floor? Nope, you got those down, Jen? Okay, agenda item 4. Leicestershire and Rutland Safeguarding Adults Board Annual Report 22-23, pages 19 to 50. This was considered by the Adults and Communities Overview and Scrutiny on the 4th of September. Their comments were attached to order paper mark 4. With us today, we have the independent chair of the board, Siona Douglas. She's joining us via Teams to present the report. Siona, we didn't get time to meet earlier, but welcome and thank you for
thank you, Councillor Robinson.
Yeah, and thank you for the work you do, and thank you for coming along to present. We've got Griff Jones, Head of Service Safeguarding, is at the meeting in case of any questions. So, Siona, do you want to take us through reports, and then I'll ask Christine Radford as lead cabinet member for Adults and Communities to say a few words. Over to you, Siona.
Thanks very much, Chair, and good morning, members. Thank you for having me this morning. I'm Siona Douglas. I'm the independent chair of the Leicestershire and Rutland Safeguarding Adults Board. And obviously today we're looking at the Leicestershire element and the responsibilities there around safeguarding. I'll assume that you read the report. I've got a few matters to highlight and then obviously open for questions. This is the report for the period 22-23, so it's the financial year, so it ended in March, and as you mentioned, Chair, this report went to scrutiny. So there's just one element I just want to highlight with you, because we have done an amendment following scrutiny on page 11 of the report. At the top of the page, there is a sentence that we are removing, so it's the first sentence that we're removing from the report. So the sentence will start, we have reviewed how we record protected characteristics. So just to kind of highlight for you, we've deleted that because I think it was a bit of a confusion. So thanks to scrutiny members for highlighting that to me. That was really helpful. I think there's been, obviously there's been a lot of activity around safeguarding, particularly as we're in the we're kind of coming out of the kind of COVID and the post-COVID period. And so just kind of quite interesting to note is we talk about safeguarding concerns, and if I talk about it in kind of really simplistic terms, it's referrals, so people who ring in or report in concerns about residents in the community where there may be a safeguarding issue. And we then talk about safeguarding inquiries, which in terms of what we go out and investigate those incidents and check to ensure that people are protected. So the issues around the concerns, the referrals, have been very much kind of more or less the same in 2022-23 as they were in 21-22. And there's been a reduction in the number of investigations from 2021-22 to 22-23. And some of that is around probably kind of more crisper analysis, more people being seen and kind of checked in terms of protection at the concern stage, where it doesn't mean it's moved to an inquiry, or it may be that people are waiting for other types of services. I think it'll be really important that we track this next year, because we will be able to kind of align what the changes have been post-COVID and pre-COVID, because COVID obviously has skewed a bit around how our referrals are made, because a lot of people weren't seen due to COVID periods, and a lot of people weren't seen in care homes. And obviously we're picking up kind of issues that may have emerged both in the community and care homes in this post-COVID period. It's interesting to note that, again, as in previous years, the highest number of sort of referrals and issues that are relating to safeguarding are around self-neglect and acts of omission. And neglect, the kind of category is very broad in terms of neglect and acts of omission. So that can mean neglect in the community, people not looking after themselves, not taking care of their needs, not feeding themselves, not looking after their personal care needs. And it can also mean people not providing care to them, so missing appointments in care, or kind of not having medication. And acts of omission is kind of those sorts of kind of issues where perhaps there's been a home care visit that hasn't taken place, somebody's had medication which hasn't been administered. So that the category is very broad to be able to pin down exactly what it is, but it does give us a measure of how we need to target the work that we're doing. And next down was physical abuse, which was the next category. So it does kind of help home the work that the board needs to do in terms of safeguarding assurance. So with that in mind, our annual plan this year had two priorities that we were delivering in this particular year, which is part of our 3-year strategic plan, and that was hidden harm and care homes. And the care homes issue was around awareness, confidence in safeguarding, prevention of safeguarding referrals, and hidden harm was in relation to the fact that many types of abuse are hidden. Domestic abuse is hidden, care homes are hidden, modern slavery is hidden. So really kind of targeting those areas where we were getting the information that led us to believe we needed to create more awareness both in the community and within the services that are working around that. We've been doing a lot of work in this last year, really, that we've identified needed to take place. So just kind of looking forward for members to understand where we are looking forward. So we're looking to have a dashboard of data across the partnership. So that's local authority data, police and health data, to help inform us what are the issues that are coming up from a data perspective in terms of safeguarding. We're looking to revise our strategic plan for 3 years, starting in March next year. So this year we're spending that time revising that, because obviously a lot has changed since we had COVID. We've got the cost of living crisis. So there are a number of things that we need to kind of look at as a board. And we're obviously reviewing the Safeguarding Adults Reviews action plans and ensuring that we're delivering the change that's needed on that. And this year, our main priorities are the Mental Capacity Act assessments, because we know that there's continued issues and increasing concerns around people and their mental capacity, and ensuring that people are assessed appropriately and receive the appropriate support to facilitate and help them if they're in the safeguarding process. And self-neglect, which is obviously a significant issue that's emerged following the COVID period, where people haven't been receiving or identifying themselves the care and support that they need. I think I'll probably stop there, Chair, and allow for questions, but just hopefully that sets the scene a little bit for members.
Thank you, Fiona. Very good. I've got you first, Christine.
Yes, thank you very much for that, Fiona. I think you've summed it up very well. We did discuss it very thoroughly, I think, at the scrutiny meeting, and you answered the questions and you've taken it on board. So thank you very much, and I'd like to propose that we accept the report from her.
Thank you, Christine. I've got you, Deborah.
Thank you. I'm happy to second the motion. I think as reported nationally, there continues to be the pressure on health and care services in Leicestershire, and this in turn impacts the workforce. And I think that sort of shows a little bit in the report. And just to mention, it was also good to read the mention of domestic abuse within the annual report. I think the impact of domestic abuse on families is huge, and that features a lot in my work in the Children and Families Department. So it's all connected. So good to see that in there.
Okay, excellent, Fiona. So thank you very much. So it was moved by Christine, seconded by Deborah. All in favour? Okay, it's unanimous. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. I hope to see you at some point, Councillor.
Yeah, next time you're in.
Thank you now.
Thank you.
It will do.
Thank you.
Thank
5,
you now.
medium-term financial strategy, latest position, 51 to 104. Seeks approval of some changes to the capital programme and for the approach to updating the MTFS. Scrutiny Commission had a look at this on the 6th September, and a draft minute is enclosed at marked order paper, marked 5 on the order paper. We've got Declan here, where is he? Oh, there, who's going to present the report, and then I'll go to Lee. Declan.
Thank you, Chair. So the report provides information on the budget monitoring for the current financial year based on information up to the end of period 4. And it also provides information on the wider financial context in respect of local government and specifically the potential risks and issues emerging that will shape our approach to refreshing the medium-term financial strategy. A summary of the revenue forecast is set out in the table on paragraph 24 and shows an overspend for the financial year of £8.9 million. The key drivers of the overspend are adult social care, children's social care and inflation. Together, these factors are increasing costs by £17 million. The additional costs are partly mitigated by the £8 million boost to our loan income received from higher interest rates. Inflation staying higher for longer than expected has been well publicised. So despite allocating £22 million in the budget, we're expecting to require an additional £4 million across a range of services for this financial year. Adult social care are experiencing higher packages costs and people are requiring support for longer, driving the £8 million overspend in that department. The focus on hospital discharge is undoubtedly contributing and there will need to be work with health to address this. Children's social care is also overspending by £8 million. Despite the number of children in care being relatively stable for the last couple of years. Additional asylum-seeking children is causing £2 million of this overspend, but the biggest factor is the cost of placements, which have increased significantly. This has been caused by both the level of support that service users need and the lack of adequate market supply. These overspends shouldn't be seen as a one-off issue, but pressures that will impact the future years of the medium-term financial strategy and necessitate a combination of more savings and council tax increases. The directors of both departments are developing an action plan to target reductions in the forecast, although it's unlikely to eliminate the overspend this year. As a reminder, the current medium-term financial strategy shows a gap of £13 million for next year, rising to £88 million by 2026-27. The current year cost overspend will add directly to this position, but the benefit of interest income will reduce as base rates fall back and our cash balances are used. We've done well historically at balancing the resources available with the services that we need to provide. However, this gets more difficult every year that passes. Recent articles published by CITFA is of particular note as they warn that they expect a Section 114 notice from an authority that is well run and well led due to service pressures. We cannot be complacent and need to keep a focus on the financial position. Getting into financial difficulty doesn't result in additional government help, just additional costs to dig yourself out of the situation. We've no indication of local government funding beyond next year as multiple reforms are scheduled for the new Parliament. This uncertainty will require us to be well prepared even if difficult choices are required. The report goes on to cover the capital position following the review of the programme. The 4-year programme has increased from £510 million in the original MTFS to £570 million. This is a combination of delayed expenditure from the previous financial year and additional expenditure added following the receipt of new income. All changes to the programme are fully funded. The recommendations are set out in the order paper.
Thank you, Declan. Lee?
Thank you, Nick. Although we try our best to reduce the financial pressures that we're experiencing, the reality is a significant proportion are not avoidable, and we will need to consider further savings and council tax increases. None of us take pleasure in seeing other authorities fail around the country, but it does vindicate our approach to managing the council's finances as being the right one by the prudent approach this council has taken in both managing its finances, but also in planning, shaping and taking the tough decisions that others have avoided. The nation's finances are being squeezed and will be until the economy gets back on its feet. All we can do in the meantime is continue to operate efficiently and target our resources at the services our residents need, and in particular those vulnerable ones. Can I thank Scrutiny for their realistic comments that are included in the report, and thank Declan and the whole team, and I'm happy to move the 3 recommendations on the order paper.
Richard?
Thank you, Chairman. Seconded. It's clearly disappointing and even, might say, depressing picture, but I think it's important to remind ourselves and the public at large as well that we are both the lowest funded county council and also very efficient, as we've been told by an independent body. In other words, we make the best use we can of the money that we've got. And all we can do is simply, in my view, keep on doing that until we get more funds. Thank you, Chairman.
Very good, Richard. DT?
I just want to touch on the children's area. Just as an example of the overspends there, we've got 10 high-risk children who we are having to place, and that's costing us £5 million a year, and that's obviously something that we can't continue, and we are working really hard to try and address the placement costs that we're being charged. But it is really difficult to swallow for me the profit making that is charged from vulnerable children for their placement. So it's something we really need to address. I think that needs to come from national as well. They need to address profit making from vulnerable children is not acceptable. We are looking to expand our own placements, but obviously we need staffing and resources to do that. And I think we're all aware of the skill shortages that we've got, so that's proving very difficult to do. But that is something we need to do. And you know, spending £5 million on 10 children is obviously affecting other children that we can't place where we need to. So it's something we need to address. But I think we need some national direction as well and some caps on costs for children. But we are working hard behind the scenes on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. Christine?
Thank you, Nick. It's well reported in this documentation about the concerns that we have in adults, and I can assure the Cabinet that we are doing our best to tackle the issues, and they're all itemised of which section of the adults we have issues with. So yes, like Deborah's got with her department, we've got some high needs areas, and we do have to look after our old people. Thank you.
Yeah, it's certainly a tough time, Declan, even with us being super efficient, decisive and not ducking difficult decisions. You can see that things are dire for us. It's been moved by Lee and seconded by Richard. Can we have a show of hands in favour of the motion? Thank you. Thank you, Declan. Investing in Leicestershire Programme Annual Performance Report 22 to 23, pages 105 to 140. It is what it is. Scrutiny Commission have considered the report on the 6th of September. A draft minute is attached to order paper marked 6. We've got John Bennett, Head of Strategic Property, to present the report, and then I'll be going to Lee. John.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody. It's my pleasure to once again present the Fund's Annual Performance Report, pages 105 to 140 of your pack. Cabinet may recall on the 11th of February Cabinet meeting, which the Cabinet resolved to approve the Fund's revised strategy to reflect the change to guidance rules from HM Treasury and SIPFA, which meant it was necessary to ensure that financial considerations are not the primary reason for investment and development decisions for the Fund. This was the move from the Corporate Asset Fund to investing in Leicestershire Programme. The Council continues to be prudent and has never borrowed externally to support its investments, with these having been funded from internal revenue underspends. And whilst the primary focus of the Fund is no longer to generate an income for income's sake, instead its primary focus is on job creation, economic growth, regeneration and addressing market failure, it is still considered good financial management to ensure that the Council uses its assets prudently. Turning now to the performance of the Fund, in paragraphs 29 and 30 of the covering report, Cabinet will note that the Fund increased in value by £26.7 million, with directly held property assets having a net increase of £5 million, and indirect assets, such as the pooled property fund debt and infrastructure bank risk share, increasing by £21 million.
As per paragraph 31, it can be seen that direct property assets, including development land, achieved an overall positive return of 11.2%, but these figures do disguise movements within each asset class. As per page 117 of the report, Appendix A, Cabinet will note these variations, namely the office portfolio down £4 million worth in capital value, albeit generating 3 times the income from the rest of the fund. Industrial and distribution sectors up 2 million, rural down 4 million, and sites under development up 10 million. And as regards the indirect investments, whilst pooled property reduced in value by 6 million, the private debt increased by 5 million, and the fund benefited from £22 million worth of new investment in pooled infrastructure and bank risk share funding. As regards the income performance, there has been a slight drop. The increasing returns to the fund of £2.3 million over the year by the direct property assets was cancelled out by a drop in income from the pooled property debt, which in the previous year it had benefited from. But overall, the fund generated a net income of £5.8 million, including central costs. Taking a holistic view of the fund's let property, the Cabinet will note on page 117 that the total return of the funding was 6.8% against a target of 6%. And whilst this represents a fall of 1.3 percentage points from 21-22, this compares very well against the national benchmark of nearly minus 15%. Due to the valuation data being just after last year's September's mini-budget, the figures do not take into account the impact of that budget on the economy and property investment and development market in particular. This impact will be reflected in next year's annual revaluation. And as a property team, we have looked at what impact the September 22 budget would have had if the valuation had been set at the Council's year-end 22-23 instead of October 22. And over £7.4 million would have come off the capital value of the direct property assets, majority being £7 million write-down in the capital value of its office investments. There would have been no impact on income, as that's not going to be impacted unless, say, a tenant left, particularly a large office, and we would be looking to re-let it. So whilst the capital value may have dropped, the ratio of income to capital improved, so we see nearly a 6% improvement in income return on the capital value. But overall, we estimate that the September 22 budget would have had a minus 1.3% impact on the total return of the direct property investments. Page 117 gives an overview of the reasons behind the various asset sector performances of the fund, but I'd like to just take a moment on the rural estate, if I may. Whilst this sector of the fund enjoyed substantial capital growth, underpinned by securing valuable residential planning permission, the income from the farm estate fell slightly year on year. And following difficulties on a certain farm in recent years, we decided to instigate an independent review of the way in which we manage the rural estate. The review is wide-ranging and covers such subjects as the management and monitoring of the portfolio, data management, compliance, KPIs, programme and budgeting, resourcing, rent reviews and lease renewals, and the approvals process for new farm tenants. It is also covering diversification opportunities, such as use of the land as natural capital and renewable energy, etc. And it will also examine the advantages and disadvantages of in-hand farming, where we would bring in contractors to farm the land directly for the council rather than letting it out. We're also reviewing the terms of our business tenancies. On pages 125 to 128, the annual report also provides an update on where we are with the major projects such as Lutterworth East, Leaders Farm, Lutterworth, Quorn Solar and Airfield Farm, Market Harborough, which I do not intend to go into detail now, but I can answer questions if required, and Airfield Farm is the subject of the next paper. The Scrutiny Commission was presented with its report on 6th of September, and whilst the Commission noted no external borrowing was currently sensible and that the revised approach to the strategy was welcome, it did make some requests, and so future performance reports will provide details of wider economic benefits being achieved by the programme alongside income, consider the development of targets, wider benefits to be achieved by the programme, which might be incorporated into the next iteration of the ILP strategy. It will also distinguish between the rate of return arising from the Council's property investments and financial non-property investments in future performance reports, and finally include within future property reports an explanation of some of the terms used, for example, yield, net yield, income return, etc., and the different targets referenced in the strategy. Mr. Bill also requested that his objection to the future development of land between Earl Chiltern and Stony Stanton be recorded. Cabinet is asked to approve the recommendation in paragraph 3 and to note the contents of this report. Thank you very much.
Good. Lee, you're first.
Leader, can I thank John for a detailed annual report once again. This report shows that we are not being complacent and we are taking steps to ensure that we are maximising every area of the portfolio and will continue to do so. By continuing to invest in our sites and securing planning permissions, there will be more job creation and more local economic growth. Also, the work we do on long-term strategic planning ensures that we have a constant stream of land for new homes, which is a key requirement in the county. Since 2014, planning consent has been granted for 3,340 homes on county council land. We are currently promoting sites that will deliver 1,200 more, plus others in emerging local plans. We have, as today, built out 1.4 million square foot of employment space with further potential for an additional 1 million square foot, which is a true benefit to the economy of Leicestershire. Can I again thank Scrutiny for its comments and move the recommendations on the order paper?
Good. Richard?
Thank you, Chairman. I thank John for his very detailed report. Yes, I think this programme continues to serve both the people of Leicestershire and the council well. I'm interested to hear the calculation of the effects of the mini budget that would have taken place. Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah, I noticed, John, that obviously we've no debt, which is good because that's one of the things that's killing off property companies, especially if they're on variable rates. I noticed that values do go up and down. I know you're under an obligation to revalue constantly, whereas a lot of people don't bother. But I also noticed particularly it provides a very important contribution to the council's financial position in terms of the income. And although you say that the raison d'etre of the CAIF now, the ILP has changed, it is important that we do maintain that income, because if we don't maintain that 5 or 6 million, it will have to result in more cost savings or cuts at this county council, because we're maxing out everything that we can raise from the general public anyway. And as you've heard earlier on, we've got a huge increase in costs in adults and children. And in a way, we should be proud of this, because you could argue that it is subsidising the adults and children's deficits. So although you've got new reasons to run the ILP, the primary reason must always remain income, I think, especially in the present time. We can't afford to be too magnanimous on other projects that we're doing. We do desperately need the income. I think you've done pretty well in the circumstances of the last year. So it's been moved by Lee and seconded by Richard. All in favour? Thank you, John. Well, you're doing the next one, aren't you? Airfield Business Park Development Proposal, final phase, 141 to 156. So we just heard about what we're doing to try and raise money and make profit. Scrutiny Commission had a look at this again on September 7th. I was there along with Lee. It's attached to the order paper mark 7. We've got some comments in from Phil King. They were considered by the Commission, and you're going to explain the proposals now, John.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, following the comments in the Fund's performance report, I now present the proposed revised scheme at Airfield Business Park, Market Harbour, on pages 141 to 155 of your pack. Cabinet will note that the paper leads with context about the economic growth regeneration and job creation, as this does reflect the pivot the Fund went through earlier this year. Regeneration of this fallow piece of land is expected to generate 250 new jobs through the construction phase and when operational, adding another £45,000 per job to the local economy. The scheme has already contributed £7 million to the local economy, and we expect this revised scheme to contribute a further £11 million. Given the success of the previous phases, we now have the opportunity to close out the scheme with a viable and well-designed development. There is already a planning application in for part of this site, which was submitted back in 2021 and due to be determined in November. And since then, due to build cost inflation, the original scheme has become unviable and undeliverable. However, it was decided that the appropriate strategy was to allow the current application to be determined in order that we can secure the principle of the type of development on the site, and we will be able to keep the viable elements of the scheme, which would still be deliverable even if others were changed. So as per paragraphs 31 to 42, the scheme retains the 16 smaller units, but the rest of the original scheme has changed and a new application will be submitted to reflect this, hopefully in October, subject to the budget and master plan being approved today. So as well as keeping the 16 smaller units, the revised scheme proposals include 2 drive-through units and a 60,000 square foot industrial unit. Terms are already agreed with the 2 drive-throughs and the 60k unit, which de-risks the project as nearly 70% will already be pre-let and only 30% will have to be speculatively built. Furthermore, we expect some of the other units to be pre-let during the planning and construction phase prior to the scheme completion in 2026. In fact, we're hoping to have agreed another 12,000 square foot unit this week. Turning to the finance estimates in paragraphs 43 to 69, Cabinet will see the underlying assumptions we have made to ensure the scheme is built and then occupied and run to budget. High level, the scheme is expected to cost £16.5 million, net of the initial land cost of £2 million, and it's expected to generate just over £1 million a year, which means the scheme has a net initial yield of 5.5%. The underlying assumptions listed in paragraph 57, and the majority are backed either by local evidence, like rents being achieved on the previous phases of this scheme or other local schemes, or in line with national market normal assumptions, such as 2% capital growth, 7.5% voids, although our portfolio currently runs at 2.5% to 3% voids. And setting aside £2.3 million for lease and dilapidations, even though the scheme will be let on full repairing and insuring terms, is also cautiously prudent. The scheme has been costed by external quantity spares and a further £700,000 for possible further build cost price inflation prior to the signing of the build contract in approximately a year's time, plus a further 10% of contingency of the build cost. And we hope to better the initial build cost estimate by procuring a builder through an open tender contract. Prior to the Scrutiny Commission meeting, Councillor King, as local member, asked if the 2 drive-through uses, whether they're coffee or other food and drink operators, are in conflict with council public health policies. It was reported to the Commission and noted in the minutes that whilst the use is deemed not to be in conflict with council public health policies, we do consider health implications on our schemes and look for ways in which schemes can be improved health-wise, such as ease of walking to the scheme or cycling, etc. And this scheme has both cycle shelters and a dedicated cycle route through to the adjacent residential scheme. In any case, the application will still be considered on its merits by planning officers and the DCRB once and if submitted. Councillor King also raised highways impact issues, and these too will be considered by county highways officers as and when an application is submitted. Cabinet is asked to approve the recommendations on pages 141 and 142. Thank you.
Looks a damn good scheme to me, Lee.
Thanks, Leader. Can I thank John and his team for the work on this? It is a good scheme. First phase of Airfield Business Park created 160 jobs. I'm pleased to say, obviously, this scheme will now add another 250 jobs, so 400 jobs in total, and adding over £18 million to the local economy. Hopefully, if we can secure planning permission in the spring, this means a start on site next winter. Again, we note Scrutiny's comments, and I'm more than happy to move the 3 recommendations on the order paper, Chair.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you, Chairman. Apologies for my computer noise. Thank you, Jenny, for helping me out there. I'm happy to second the motion.
Okay, we have no other speakers. All in favour, please show. Thank you. Go ahead and build it, John. 6, Corporate Complaints and Compliments Annual Report 22-23, pages 157 to 186. It is the annual report, sets out headline statistics, shows where we've improved and where we haven't. Simon Parsons, the Council's Customer Relations Manager, is here. Both the patience of Job, because I've seen some of the things he gets us to deal with. When he's spoken, I'll get Lee to speak. But thank you for your work. I do see some of the stuff you get, and it is very difficult, but you handle it well.
Thank you, Chair. So yes, just to update Cabinet on the key themes and messages from complaints activity during the year 22-23. The report shows some significant challenges and a significant increase, predominantly across the non-statutory complaint services. So put simply, that's the non-social care elements, which saw the largest increase of approximately 28% in overall activity. Specifically within that, I would highlight the rise in two areas really: school admissions, which have been stable for a number of years, but saw some specific issues and pressure points around demand pressures during the year, and special educational needs, which has been growing in volume for the last 2 or 3 years, but again struggling with demand pressures, very much the national trend in that area, that but saw again significant demand pressures there. Perhaps inevitably, with the volume increases, we also saw increase to the referrals to the local government and social care ombudsman, who looked at 60% more cases during the year. Inevitably, again, more findings of maladministration, up to 19, but actually proportionately to the numbers they looked at, was slightly down, which shows that for the most part, responses at a local level were adequately dealing with the complaints and reaching the right outcomes. It's probably also worth highlighting on page 168 of your papers, which sets out the kind of wider traffic that the complaints team deal with, the increasing prominence of early resolution issues. So the team dealt with approximately 2,000 kind of inquiries at what's often called that informal resolution stage, which clearly still all needs response. That ranges from just moving people through to the right areas promptly to nipping things into the bud, and that kind of early fixes, which all helps prevent further increase into the complaints area. The two social care areas were more stable during the year, despite some challenges, and present a more stable position, as indeed does the number of compliments coming through, which again provides important balance there. Very slightly down on the year before, but still at 211, a good level of just representing some of the things we are getting right in amongst the challenges. I think that's the key messages I wanted to deliver, but as I say, just to the recommendation is for Cabinet just to note the report.
Thank you, Simon. Lee?
Thank you, Leader. The report rightly focuses on the significant areas of increase in complaints in SEN and admissions. I would like to highlight the work being undertaken by our transformation unit in both areas to ensure services are better placed to manage the increased demand that they are receiving. There has been significant volume increase generally, and this has been recognised by adding additional capacity to the complaints team during the year. It's also good to see the compliments are recorded as usual in the report in all the expected areas. The team play a role in helping residents navigate to the services they need and are well placed to quickly identify and resolve inquiries before they go on to become more complex complaints. So finally, I'd just like to thank Simon and his team for the report and the work they do, and move the recommendation on the order paper.
Thank you, Lee. Richard?
Thank you. As you say, Chairman, difficult situation for Simon and his team to deal with. So I thank Simon and his colleagues for doing that, and I'm happy to second the motion.
Yeah, we're all pleased with the work you do, Simon. It is very, very difficult at times, so thanks a lot. All in favour? Thank you, Simon. So agenda item 9 is the stuff about Bradgate Park Trust. I'm the chairman and Deborah's on it as a member, and she's also the local member down there. So Deborah and I will have to leave for this item, and Lee Brecon will take the chair.
Okay, thank you. Item 9, community mission bodies, Voluntary Action Leicestershire and the Bradgate Trust. I can confirm that both the leader and deputy leader have left the room. Agenda item 9 concerns the proposed transfer of assets and liability from what are known as community admission bodies, which are part of the Leicestershire Pension Fund, these being Voluntary Action Leicester and the Bradgate Park Trust. This was considered by the local pension committee on the 8th of September and the committee approved the transfer. Declan Keegan, as Director of Corporate Resources, is here to explain the proposals. Then I will add a few comments as Cabinet Lead. Thank you, Declan.
Thank you, Lee. So, as you mentioned, the report seeks the approval of the transfer of pension fund assets and liability of Voluntary Action Leicestershire and Bradgate Park Trust to the County Council. The transfer is obviously subject to the approval by the other organisations involved, and as mentioned, the Leicestershire Pension Committee did grant approval on the 8th of September as one of those. Historically, voluntary sector bodies providing a public service did used to join the local government pension scheme, although this tended to be decades ago when the expected costs of pensions were much, much lower. Under these historic arrangements, there was no guarantor to protect the pension fund should the voluntary sector body have any financial difficulties. And this is something the pension fund would now require and has been working with Voluntary Action Leicestershire and Bradgate Park Trust to remedy this situation. So the proposal in the paper is for the County Council to guarantee Voluntary Action Leicestershire and provide a joint guarantee with the City Council for Bradgate Park Trust. And what we're trying to do here is just mimic the position as if guarantors had been put in place when these two bodies joined the fund initially. So for Voluntary Action and Bradgate, the benefit is a reduction in financial risk to the organisation, which can have a significant impact on their balance sheets. The County Council is in a much better position to take on this risk, as we can take a view much further into the future, and liabilities are relatively small compared to what we already hold. There has been a thorough review of the risks involved in the transfer, and while the transfer isn't without any risk, on balance over a sufficiently long period of time, it will probably have a positive financial impact on the County Council. The recommendations are as set out in the order paper.
Thank you, Declan. As lead member for resources, I am comfortable with the level of risk being taken by the County Council. Officers stay close to the assumptions that the pension fund actuary makes and have completed a thorough review of the risks. As lead member for resources, I'm pleased that we can do such a positive thing in supporting a couple of our very important local organisations. Can I ask Richard to second?
Thank you. As colleagues know, I work with Lee on resources. I agree with what he said and I second the motion.
Thank you, Richard. Can I have a show of hands that that's agreed? Okay, thank you. We'll just wait for Mr. Rushton and Mrs. Taylor to return to the room. Thank you. As per the recommendations, that was approved and agreed.
Thank you, Lee. Agenda item 10, A511 Growth Corridor, making compulsory purchase orders and side road orders for required land. Requires our approval. We've got Anne Carruthers here, Director of E&T. She'll present, then Ozzy, who's got responsibility on call. Anne, morning, welcome.
Morning, Leader, thank you. This report seeks approval to make the compulsory purchase order and side road order required for the A511 corridor scheme. As Cabinet is aware, the scheme involves the improvement of a number of junctions and some dualling of the existing A511 and a new section of Link Road. That will all reduce congestion along that corridor and help support growth set out in the local plan. Additional land is required for the scheme, and while we're pursuing land by negotiation, that acquisition by negotiation, we also need to progress with the compulsory purchase order and undertake the side road order process so we can ensure successful delivery. We do have tight timescales attached to the funding for the scheme from the DFT. The current cost estimate for the scheme is 62.7 million plus contingency, although at this stage of a scheme of a project, we do work within a cost range, and that currently sits between 50 billion and 70 million. To fund this, we've secured 41.8 from DFT's major road network funding. That's subject to the full business case approval, however. And the remainder of that funding will come from Section 106 contributions via the Colville Contribution Strategy. We have updated plans to the appendices for this report which have been issued, and these reflect two late minor changes to the land acquisition arrangements. The first one is a parcel of land at Thornburn Road roundabout. It was number 007. We no longer require that, and the second parcel 024A is being added at Barton Road roundabout. That piece of land that we're adding will enable amendments to be made to a driveway at 36 Barton Road, and that will allow a vehicle to turn within the curtilage of the property and come out in a forward gear. So it really is to facilitate the arrangements of that householder. We've been in contact with all the affected landowners and are working to obtain the land by negotiation, as I've mentioned. However, if that fails, the CPO will come into its own there. So that's why we're tracking the processes. The side road orders allows us to deal with accesses and rights of way that are affected by the delivery of the scheme. The orders have been drawn up in collaboration with LCC's property and legal teams and taking on board legal counsel advice to ensure it's robust, because we may end up in a public inquiry. The forward look for the scheme in terms of timescales, the orders will be made in the next few weeks with the statutory objection period following that. The outcome of that will determine if we need a public inquiry. If that is required, it's the longest length in terms of the project timeline. If that's required, we anticipate it would have concluded with hopefully a Secretary of State decision on the outcome of that by the winter of 2024. We will be doing the full business case work to align with that, so we'd be in a position to hopefully have DFT approval of that, so that would then allow us drawdown of the funding and the scheme to start on site March 2025 with two-year construction. The recommendations are as per the order paper, and I refer you to those amended plans that have been submitted. Thank you, Chair.
Great. Ozzy.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, I formally move the order paper. This requirement is there for the smooth running of the project along the A511 corridor, and will effectively give a safer flow along there, and I'm sure for the benefit of the residents along that flow, this order is required, and I fully support it.
And I do too, so I formally second it. And the amount of houses they're building down there is incredible, and they're all selling as soon as they build them. I mean, I drive past it a couple of times a week, and it is quite nice, the range and the look of the houses I think is really good, and it doesn't surprise me that they're selling quickly. So I think this is really important to get this done for Colville. Moved and seconded, all in favour? Let's hope we can avoid a public inquiry, Ams, to be a lot better. It's a novelty one for you. Vertical tree traffic calming proposal, Walton Way, MOUNTSORREL, 243 to 276. You're here again to present it. Have we got the local member here? Leon is here. He's a local member. He's asked to speak on this item. So, Anne, if you present your report, Leon, come over here. Sit at the end, Leon. So you're going to speak, Anne. Then I'm going to go to Leon, and then you and Ozzy can respond to Leon, and then we'll move to a vote. So over to you, Anne.
Thank you, Chair. We're seeking approval here to implement that vertical traffic calming scheme in Walton Way, MOUNTSORREL, and we're bringing the report because the local member does not support the proposal. The scheme itself is required as part of a Section 106 planning obligation to address speeding concerns, and it comprises speed cushions and a speed table. It's related to development and Rothley. It will be funded by 103,000 will come from the developer, and the remaining 37,000 from County Council, a road safety budget. While there is a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit on Walton Way, our surveys show that the 85th percentile, which is the speed at which 85% of the traffic will travel up to, at or below is what they travel, that average is coming along across a number of locations we looked at 36 miles an hour, so, well above the 30-mile-an-hour speed limit. We carried out a consultation in February and March this year. We had 8 responses in favour, 709 no comments and 37 objections, including the local member and the parish council. The basis of the local member and parish council objection was that they would prefer the funding to go into to be reallocated to an improved pedestrian crossing on Rothley Road in Mountsorrel. Any new pedestrian crossing, as I'm sure this cabinet is aware, requires to meet a set criteria involving pedestrian volumes, traffic volumes, and a number of other factors. There would also need to be a deed of variation to the Section 106, which would require the developer agreement to put that through the planning process to get that to change that commitment, the planning obligation. The assessment work for the crossing and the planning process could not be undertaken before the expiry of the current Section 106, which is December this year, which means ultimately that money would go back to the developer and we wouldn't be at liberty to use it. In view of the fact that the alternative preference for the use of the money by the local member and the parish council cannot be concluded before the money expires, the Section 106 obligation expires, and the fact that our data shows there is a speeding issue on Walton Way, the report recommends that the Cabinet supports the implementation of the traffic calming scheme and the use of the Section 106 monies for that. Thank you.
Very good. Leon, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm here actually on the request of the Parish Council in Mountsorrel, and also as a part of my self-development and in my learning curve. Because as a county councillor, most of the complaints I received from that area was about speed. And when I saw the proposal about actually the speed bumps, I refer to them, not tables, etc., speed bumps in general, I was positive, and my original response was very positive, as you possibly know from the records. It was surprised to see actually that there was so much opposition, but by the very same people who were clear about speed. They didn't really want the speed bumps. They wanted to reduce speed, but no speed bumps. And I went to the Parish Council, we had a discussion, and they came up with a constellation, I would say, of reasons. First of all, they said it creates noise. They say that it increases actually the air pollution because the cars are slowing down and then speeding up again. Also, it penalizes the small cars because big cars have big suspension, small cars actually are suffering more. And also that emergency services may have a problem to access areas around Walton Way. When I asked the question, what is actually better for you, they said VAS, Vehicle Activation Systems. And it was my suggestion whether actually we can put these small dummy little pupils actually by the end of the road. It seems it works in certain areas. The bottom line is I understand the financial challenges, and definitely if you do not undertake, actually it's pretty expensive speed bumps, you're going to save some money, and of course it is a challenge how you're going to deal with the 106 and the developers. However, I'm here actually on the request of the Parish Council and local residents. And this is the end of my speech. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Leon. Thanks for coming. Ozzy, over to you.
Thank you, Leader. I understand where Leon is coming from, but the actual fact of the matter is that speed tables do actually reduce speed more than vehicle activated signs. It's a feature where the cars have to slow down for the actual tables and speed humps. If the actual tables and speed humps are set properly between each other, you will not get the amount of carbon emissions that people are worrying about. I know in lots of areas they're not popular, I can appreciate that, but when you have a speeding problem, you know, you need to address it. £103,000 is a lot of money that this council is being offered to introduce these safety measures. And I do actually support the application to actually go ahead with the speed humps, or as you say, bumps, Leon, for the reasons of road safety.
Can I just check, Ozzy, are you formally moving the implementation of vertical
I'll
traffic?
formally move it.
Thank you. Can I go to Richard first, then I'll take speakers, so we've got something on the table.
I formally second that, Chairman, and of course, as we know, speeding, one of the biggest things we get complaints about. So I think it's important we do address the speeding issue in the way that Ozzy suggested.
Okay, so it is a moved and seconded. I've got two speakers. Firstly, Lee, then Peter. Lee?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I brought one of these papers about 4 or 5 years ago on behalf of residents of Kirby Muxloe and Leicester Forest East Parish Council. It was when Lubborsthorpe was being started, and there was money set aside, over £500,000 for speed control through the parishes, and sort of myself and Richard Blunt objected to the proposals that the County Council had put on the table on behalf of the residents. This was probably 5 years ago, so the Parish Council has clearly objected to it. So Cabinet at that point actually went with us, and it was objected to and it was refused. So as the years went on, people started saying to us, there's no traffic calming, there's no speed tables, there's no speed humps. And what we had to say was, because it came and on your behalf we said no through the parish councils, it became quite clear that I think we should have said yes at the time and supported it, because a speed hump and speed table, if done correctly, does slow traffic down. We're now waiting for the 1,000th house to be occupied on Lubborsthorpe, because before we can get a second look at that money and hopefully come back through the engineers at County Council to put a scheme, probably a very similar scheme, on the table through those estates and those parishes, to try and give them what they should have really gone for probably 4 or 5 years ago. And as I say, I think they are essential, so I will be supporting the officer's recommendations today. Thank you.
Peter?
Thank you, Leader. I think just firstly, thanking Leon for coming along and putting forward the views of the Parish Council on this. I think we need to take a pragmatic view. Clearly, as Anne said, this Section 106 money that's allocated does expire at the end of the year. And I think as a council, we know the financial challenges that we face in terms of tackling issues like speeding, which that is a real tight budget in your department, Ozzy, in highways. I think where we've got funds available to us from the developer, we should be using them to reduce speeding. And I appreciate that the parish council has concerns about this particular scheme, but I think taking a pragmatic approach, saying, look, we've got this money here that's set aside, we should really use it for the benefit of our residents. So I'll be supporting the motion.
Anything else, Leon? Are you done?
No, thank you very much. As I said, I was here to express the opinion of the Parish Council, and thank you very much for listening to me. Cheers.
Please listen to you, Leon. Okay, moved by Ozzy, seconded by Richard. All in favour? Thank you. 12, physical activity programme reductions, 277 to 284. Mike Sands, Director of Public Health, is here to present. And then I'm going to go to Louise, because she's the lead member for Public Health. Morning, Mike.
Morning all. Thank you, Leader. This report sets out the latest in our redesign proposals to deliver our elements of the MTFS for 23-24 to 26-27. This one is a proposal on which we wish to consult with the public on redesigning our physical activity offer, and in doing so releasing a saving of £250,000. The paper in Table 1 and paragraph 19 sets out the detail of our current offer, which ranges from universal programmes designed to get everybody moving more and supporting developing the physical activity infrastructure to enable them to do that, through programmes targeting the least active in our population, up to specialist programmes for those with a particular issue, which could be a health condition, or it could be the need to develop fine motor skills and motor skills through fundamental movement programmes in children. Essentially, the proposal, if you like, is to go up and go down. So we want to keep the top end stuff, those specialist programmes. We want to make certain that we're doing everything we can to make everybody active. So essentially, we are squeezing the bit in the middle. That's set out in Table 2 in paragraph 20. So, as I say, it keeps support to get everyone active. As from a public health perspective, our biggest bang for buck is that thing about getting everybody to do a little bit more. But it does remove the additional support targeted on healthy people who are currently doing the least active amount of physical activity. As I said, it supports those that need targeted programmes for particular conditions, such as falls prevention, where there is clear evidence that would be a benefit, not just to population health, but also to the NHS and social care colleagues. Although as part of that, we would seek to redesign our existing leisure centre-based exercise on referral scheme to one that utilises more community-based exercise options other than centre-based referral. It would also, though, allow us to develop a children's exercise on referral programme, which is something that we haven't had before. Although I was reflecting on it this morning thinking, actually, we've never really had to have a children's exercise on referral programme before because children didn't develop issues like type 2 diabetes because they used to exercise more. So it's a bit of a sad reflection, if you like, on where we've got to with physical activity and health. Those redesign principles are based on supporting those programmes where the evidence base is the strongest, and in addition to the kind of rationale behind it, also not supporting those programmes where we believe there is more chance that other providers, the district councils or other organisations, are more likely to step in and provide them themselves because they can see a market opportunity for them. So paragraphs 21 and 22 sets out the proposal for a 6-week consultation using our usual methodology around the website and surveys to seek the views of the public providers and stakeholders on that proposal. So I'll just refer to the motion set out in the order paper. So thank you, Leader.
Good, thank you. Louise.
Thank you. Yes, I'm happy to support this. It's hard when you have to look at changing services, etc., especially when it's prevention and, we're trying to obviously support people maintain their health longer. But I think this is the best we are able to do. I think, as Mike suggested, it's covering as much as we can, with also hoping that other providers will be able to step in and just plug some of those areas where we're having to take a back seat. But I'm happy to support. Thanks.
What do the districts do? They've got all the leisure centres and the parks and stuff. We haven't got any.
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of probably part of that negotiation. So some of the removal of what we're removing is the remaining money that we work with districts. So they're providing that kind of targeted programme for the least active, the level 2 that we're removing. Again, I'd always say, I mean, I know there's a lot tied up in leisure centre contracts and a lot of money, but if you think about the leisure responsibilities of districts, it is within their gift to look at the entirety of their provision around leisure and think, what do they want to provide? Do they just want to provide a strict leisure centre-based model? Do they want to think about, because they recognise that what we currently fund them to do is a good thing, do they want to move into that space and consider what they need to do for the population as a whole? So, that might be one of the things where they might want to reconsider their own approach to physical activity alongside ours.
Will we be writing to them to tell them that they have this responsibility and they should do it? I mean, they have more money than we do, and they've got leisure centres, parks and all manner of stuff, which we haven't got at all.
I think we did in the past when we were talking to districts around a range of issues, which you'll remember they approached you about, but at that stage they wrote back, and I seem to remember they didn't say that they would be redesigning their physical activity offer to any great extent.
Well, I think you should think about it, Louise, and write to them again. They've got responsibilities in this area and they can't cost shift over to us. Christine?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm quite happy to support this, and perhaps I ought to be taking on some of the stuff as well, because I'm putting weight on. But I think as well, what we need to also consider all of the new estates that are being built and what they're going to be putting on their new estates. I mean, I think I mentioned it before, there should be areas where it's quite easy for people to do a round walk and for children to walk, we call them in my area, Shepshed jitties, but things through housing development, so that it's easier then for people to walk, say, to the shops, or the children to go to school. So I think we need to work as well more with some of the house builders, because some areas, like mine in particular, are getting a lot of houses. So I think we need to work with them as well. Thank you, but I'm quite happy to second it.
Well, again, that's more of a planning responsibility. That's districts again. I think you ought to think about this, Louise, and be telling them that they ought to be doing more. I mean, Christine's getting loads of houses, no roads, so hopefully she's getting some walkways. Can I call Deborah first? Thank you.
Yeah, just a quick question. Obviously, I've got my own views on this, but obviously I'll feed that into the consultation if we agree that today. But what about the NHS? What do they have any role in this? Because obviously prevention for them obviously ends up from people seeking support for their services because they're unhealthy. So what role do the NHS play in this? Do they put any funding in?
No, they don't. Around physical activity, they don't have an awful lot of responsibility. Across weight management as a whole, they do. So the physical activity and food bit, if you like, and they have got that responsibility, which they've just started funding for a kind of specialist weight management program. I would argue it's a little bit like when we had the conversation about social prescribing. You know, they need to provide a specialist service to help people lose weight. But if you want people to maintain that weight loss, then they need somewhere to go. So overall provision, doesn't matter if it's district funded, provided or us, needs to have sufficient capacity. So I think it's always worthwhile saying not so much that they have a specific responsibility, but it's one of those ones. If you want to do your bit, you're going to need to do something about the infrastructure which helps you keep people doing what they need to do.
Because I think there is a lot of support out there and a lot of programs that you can do. I mean, I've just taken up the Couch to 5K, which is run by the NHS, so I'll come and call for you, Christine, and we'll go running together. I just think we need to look at it a bit more holistic, don't we? Because good health and good physical helps your mental health, helps everything, doesn't it? So we need to look at it around. But I agree with the leader about the districts playing a bit more role in this. So they have, but I think it's also about how we communicate that, because it's motivating people to want to do it and enjoy it. You know, the walking groups that have been set up are absolutely fantastic now from a social side as well as the physical side. So, you know, we probably need to look at that message that we get out there about motivating people as well.
I'd agree. And don't forget, once you've gone from Couch to 5K, you've got a variety of park runs at Watermead and Bosworth Field on a Saturday morning, for which the car park revenue would be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
I am planning to do one in a couple of weeks. I will let you know.
Thank you. Can I just go back to Louise?
And just to say that regarding planning and working with developers, we have got health in all policies that has been taken on through the planning authorities as well. And I do keep plugging with the ICB about funding prevention to help their issues at acute level.
Okay, moved by Louise, seconded by Christine. All in favour? Thank you. Thank you, Mike. 13, collection and development policy and access policy for the Record Office for Leicestershire, Leicester and Rutland, 285 to 308. A report on this was considered by the Adults and Communities Overview and Scrutiny Committee on the 4th of September. Its comments attached to the order paper marked 13. Tracy Ward, Assistant Director in Adults and Communities Departments here, along with Fran Wills, Head of Service. So Tracy and Fran, okay, and then I'll go into you, Christine.
Thank you, Chair. So the purpose of the report is to seek approval of the revised collection development policy and access policy for the Record Office for Leicestershire, Leicester City and Rutland. These policies are a requirement of the Archive accreditation and will support the Record Office accreditation submission to the National Archives in November 2023. So the recommendations are that the collection development policy and the Record Office policy for Leicestershire, Leicester City and Rutland are approved, and the access policy for the Record Office for Leicestershire, Leicester City and Rutland are approved. As you've alluded to, Scrutiny heard the revised policy in September, and information was presented by Fran, and partners have been consulted in relation to the revised policy. Just a brief summary of the elements of the policy. Obviously, we have the introduction, which contains the Record Office mission statement, where we aim to collect a diverse and preserve written information, printed, etc. We then have scope. This outlines the different types of format of collection that are within the Record Office remit. The purpose, this explains the full collection remit of the Record Office, including loans, transfers, donations, purchases and requests. It also includes the terms of reference, the responsibilities, and then there's a policy statement which also talks about how we aim to enable people to access diverse information relating to the communities and counties of Leicestershire, Rutland and the City of Leicester. Related policies, legislation and guidance, this refers to any related policies, including the Record Office access policy, and a review of the policy is due to be undertaken no later than 2028. You have two appendices attached to the documents. The Collections Development Policy 23 to 28 is Appendix A, and the Access Policy 23 to 28 can be found at Appendix B. So I now hand over to Fran.
Thank you. I just quickly take you through the detail really. As Tracy said, and you'll be aware, the County Council manage the Record Office on behalf of the partnership with Leicester City Council and Rutland County Council. That partnership enables each local authority to meet its statutory obligations with regard to the safekeeping of records, and that's set out in paragraph 12 of your report. It also helps the County Council deliver against its strategic plan, in particular the Great Communities outcome, by helping save and make accessible the cultural and historic heritage of the county. As has been said, these revised policies will form part of the Record Office's archive accreditation application to National Archive, which is due to be submitted on the 8th of November. Archive accreditation is the UK national standard for archive services, and the Record Office was last accredited in February 2018. We've consulted the partners on the policies and they are in support of them. Collections Development Policy, which is Appendix A in your report, was first established in 2009 and sets out how the Record Office will maintain and add to its collections. It's split into 8 sections, which are detailed in paragraph 26A to H of your report and is in line with accreditation requirements. The introduction, as been said, contains our mission statement to collect and preserve the printed, written, recorded and digital heritage of Leicestershire, Leicester and Rutland, and the policy also now makes reference to the access policy, which covers how we make those collections accessible. The scope details different collections held by the Record Office. So just very briefly, these are the public records, so NHS records, coroners, magistrates and prison records, but it also includes diocesan, regimental, estate, family and business records, also local authority records and personal archives and local studies collections. So they include newspapers, periodicals and maps. Section 4 talks about the different ways that material would come into the Record Office, and that's loans, donations, purchases, bequests, transfers, targeted or commissioned collecting. And Section 6 of the policy gives a series of statements on how the Record Office reaches decisions to accept items into the collection to ensure transparency and consistency of approach. It also covers reference to the geographic remit of the Record Office, which covers the County of Leicestershire, the City of Leicester and the County of Rutland, and acknowledges the various boundary changes to these administrative areas that have taken place over time. The Record Office will not accept material that does not meet those requirements. The access policy, Appendix B of your report, has been redrafted and now has a clearer format, which is similar to the museum access policy, which was approved by this Cabinet in November 2021. The access policy is required to specify how access to collections and resources held by the Record Office will be made accessible for all users and stakeholders. And again, it's split into 8 sections covered in paragraph 30A to H of your report. Contains our mission statement and also the Record Office's commitment to create a culture where people of all backgrounds, experiences feel appreciated and valued, and we provide access to everyone. The scope of the policy covers not only the Record Office building and collections, but also any outreach or engagement programmes that we might deliver in other buildings or spaces, including community venues. And Section 7 highlights the 7 identified key barriers to access and how they might be experienced. And paragraph 30F of your report references the policy statements that are contained within the access policy to try and eliminate or minimise any of those barriers. 6.5.6 of the policy points out that a principal duty of the Record Office is to ensure the long-term preservation of material in its custody. Therefore, in the case of last resort, access to original source material might be restricted to prevent further damage. And paragraphs 14 to 18 of your report make reference to the ongoing work to address the future storage requirements of the Record Office. This is important to ensure that we continue to provide conditions for our collections that will enable the Record Office to retain its status with the National Archive as an accredited place of deposit. 6.9 confirms the commitment to maximising access and upholding the requirements of the Equality Act, and paragraphs 610 to 616 of the policy sets out how that will be achieved. As Tracy's explained, Scrutiny were consulted on the policies on the 4th of September and their comments are included in your papers. If approved by Cabinet, these 2 policies will help guide the Record Office to continue to provide an excellent service for the people of Leicestershire, Leicester and Rutland and visitors to the area, and support our impending accreditation submission. Thank you.
Christine.
Thank you. I'd like to recommend that we support this recommendation. It's a really good policy that we've looked at, and the scrutiny did a thorough reading of it and puts a couple of comments in. I mean, the last one, big one that we had was the Thomas Cook collection, and if we're not careful and we don't take this policy on board, we might lose our accreditation, which is something I don't want to happen. I mean, we work across the board with Leicester City and Rutland, and I know at one time we were looking at, say, they had their own back, but it was very difficult because things do cross the border, and we do a good job, and I know it's well received by the public, and it's used quite well. So I'd like to support this recommendation.
Indeed, the recommendations are fine. I'll formally second them. I mean, I like the service, I like the policies. I don't like the building out at Wigston much. But can I just check with you that although we provide a good service, do we collect in the correct amount of money from the city and Rutland to run their service? You know, it's important because we haven't got any money.
There's a joint arrangements agreement between the county and the city, and a separate one with Rutland. That sets out that there's a proportionate contribution from each of the partners towards the total cost. So the city contributes 35% and Rutland contribute 10%. That's largely based on size of population, but also volume of material that's held by the Record Office. And that does cover all of the costs that are incurred by the County Council, as well as the direct budget associated with the Record Office. So contribution towards maintenance and those wider issues.
Very good. Just got to get yourself a new building now, because that one at Wigston's fallen was never any good when we opened it, in my view. So we've got the recommendations moved and seconded. All in favour? Thank you. Thank you very much. 14, Leicestershire and Rutland Safeguarding Children Partnership Annual Report. Jane Moore's here. She's the director, and it's been to scrutiny 5th of September. They actually welcomed it. So Jane, you walk us through it, and then Deborah will say a few words.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. So this report is bringing the 22-23 annual report of the Children's Safeguarding Partnership for consultation and comment, and to consider whether it identifies any matters that require addressing in relation to the effectiveness of safeguarding within the work of the authority. The key purpose of the annual report is to assess the impact of the work undertaken over the last year on safeguarding outcomes for children in Leicestershire, and it evaluates the performance against the priorities that were set out in the business plan for that year. The report outlines the learning and assurance and training and improvement activity of the partnership and its partners, and it specifically identifies that partner organisations, workers and managers have worked well together to safeguard children and to identify needs and areas for improvement to safeguard children in the midst of the ongoing challenges and change post-pandemic and other societal pressures such as the cost of living crisis. Particular attention has been paid to safeguarding babies, children's mental health and well-being, keeping adolescents safe, safeguarding children from diverse backgrounds, and our work with schools. The annual report of the partnership was considered by the Children and Families Overview and Scrutiny, and as pointed out, the contents were welcome. The annual report includes a summary of the consultation and the engagement work that the partnership carried out with children and young people, and all members of the Safeguarding Children's Partnership have had the opportunity to contribute and comment to the reports. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll formally move the recommendations, and just to point out that we're just one of the statutory safeguarding partners who have a shared and equal statutory duty with the local ICB board and the Chief of Leicestershire Police, so we all work together in partnership. Really good to see the work around the child mental health and emotional wellbeing, because that's one of the key issues that we're working on at the moment. And you'll see the partnership, we're working to improve engagement with schools from all sectors, which I think is really key as well, and I think they should be one of the safeguarding partners that we work with more effectively. And just to highlight the priorities for 23-25 on page 343.
Christine.
Thank you. I'd like to second this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. We have no other speakers. All in favour, please show. Thank you. Thanks, Jane. exception to contract procedurals to provide adoption support fund therapeutic services 245 to 350. Jane's staying on to explain this, then I'm going to Deborah. Jane.
Thank you. So this report is seeking the Cabinet's approval for an additional exception to the Council's contract procedure rules to directly award contracts to therapeutic services suppliers to supply therapy to eligible adoptive and special guardianship order families through the Adoption Support Fund. A previous exception was approved in September 22, and this additional exception is being requested due to a delay in putting a framework agreement in place for therapeutic services. This approval to the contract procedure rules will enable service provision to be maintained to eligible adoptive children up to the 30th of November, and whilst the Council undertakes compliant procedure process in order to establish a framework agreement for therapeutic services from the 1st of December onwards. The Adoption Support Fund was established to support those therapeutic provisions that are needed by children who are adopted or under special guardianship orders, and there is an eligibility criteria set out for it. The funding set out by the DFE states that local authorities will purchase supports from their own list of approved suppliers when the Adoption Support Fund approves funding. In paragraphs 20 to 27, we've set out the process of the development of the framework agreement for those services. This was initially due to be in place, but there has been a delay as a result in a delay in developing and finalising the specification. Once the new framework is in place, we're confident it will be able to ensure that there are appropriate contracts in place to enable us to provide that therapeutic support that's required for this group of children. Thank you.
Good, Deborah.
I'll move the motion. Jane's explained all the technical details, so I won't go further into that, but this is a key service for our children that are adopted or in SGOs, and we need to sustain those as much as we can. So yeah, very happy to move this.
Good. Christine.
I'm happy to second this.
Any other speakers? All in favour? Thank you. Okay, items referred from overview and scrutiny, none. Other items which I've decided to take as urgent, none. Exclusion of the press and public. I moved under section 100A of the Local Government Act 1972, the public be excluded for the following item of business on the grounds that involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraphs 3 and 10 of Part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Act, and that in all circumstances of the case, the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information. I'll move it. Deborah?
I'll second.
Formal vote in favour? Thank you. Can I ask every one of the members and officers presenting the next report to please leave the meeting? And Jenny will tell me when the stream's off.